The real estate sector got hit hard at the height of the coronavirus stock market crash. But those stocks roared back with a vengeance thanks to rising consumer sentiment and robust home sales. Joining me to dissect these real estate trends and what they could mean for investors is Danielle Hale, chief economist at realtor.com. So Danielle, the market here has been surprisingly resilient. What do you attribute that to?
I think it is a bit of a surprise. This pandemic is evolving in a really unexpected and uncertain way, and it's brand new for most of us. It's been a long time since we've seen anything like this. So I think to see the resilience in the housing market is surprising and definitely a good thing for homeowners and also for the economy. So a lot of the reasons why we're seeing this resilience, I think, is the momentum that the housing market had going into this year. So if you look at the last couple of months before the pandemic, the housing market was really starting to hit its stride with construction rising, new home sales rising, existing home sales had hit a 13-year high right before we went into March. And so to see the market bounce back, I think a lot of it owes to that momentum that it had coming into 2020.
Right, and as you talked about, we've seen this increased buyer demand. Do you see that continuing as this market develops?
It is hard to say at this early juncture. I know it doesn't feel early anymore, but we have seen a lot of disruption in the labor markets, and we're starting to see that disruption repaired, but it's not necessarily moving as quickly as we expected in some cases. And so that could weigh on the housing market going forward, but there are definitely some positives. So demographics are really favorable for housing, with a large number of millennials hitting ages where they typically start their own households, settle down, and get into the housing market to look for a home. And others are in the older end where they may have bought a home a couple years ago and are expanding their family or are looking to trade up. So those are both positive tailwinds for the housing market. And then we also have record low mortgage rates. So with mortgage rates below 3%, for a lot of people who would consider getting into the housing market, that's just the additional push that they need to think maybe now is the time. So those two things. And then you have some ongoing concerns that offset some of the economic concerns, which are we're spending a lot of time at home. And so people are thinking about how they can really make that time work, effectively for if they're working from home or doing school from home, and trying to make that all happen. And in some cases, they need to remodel or move in order to make that possible.
Right, because that is one trend we have seen really play out during all of this is working from home. And here in California, there have been stories of people migrating out of state because they don't have to be here anymore to do their jobs. Have you seen the data support this, and what markets are benefiting from this trend?
Yeah, so I think the trend of migrating away from cities because you can work remotely is very specific to areas where you have a lot of workers working remotely. The San Francisco Bay Area and the Silicon Valley area is one that comes to mind as an area where employers have been extraordinarily flexible in allowing remote work, and not just allowing remote work for now in the uncertain times that we're in, but even committing in some cases to allow remote work indefinitely. So that's going to free people to be able to know that they can keep their job and move anywhere. And so we have seen some transition away from those big cities. In some cases, that transition was already happening in the housing market, because as millennials age into years where they're settling down, forming families and looking for a little bit of space to raise their families, and they're already looking to the suburbs. That's where they were finding affordable properties that had some space. And this, this pandemic is just accelerating that ongoing trend. Markets that are benefiting are areas where homes are affordable, and you can get a lot of space for your money. It's hard to come by in a lot of downtown centers. So we did a hottest zip codes report recently, and we found that the #1 zip code is actually in Colorado Springs. But then outside of that, we're seeing a lot of Eastern markets do relatively well because they've done a good job of keeping up with construction and enabling home prices to stay relatively modest. A lot of areas in the West have had, in California in particular, have really struggled to keep up with buyer demand as far as creating enough new construction for the number of households that want to live there. And so that that priciness and expensiveness of the homes relative to incomes is causing a challenge for housing in those areas. And now that people can work anywhere, they're taking this opportunity to do that.
Right. And as you mentioned, new housing construction, especially here in California, that's expensive to get done. But what are you seeing happening with that? Because as you said, there aren't really enough existing houses on the market to keep up with demand. So have you seen a boon kind of to the development of new housing?
Yeah, so there aren't very many existing homes available for sale. That was kind of a trend going into this period, and it has just been exacerbated by the pandemic because buyers are still generally interested for a lot of the reasons we talked about earlier, and sellers have been a little bit more cautious. I think sellers especially were surprised at how robust buyer demand is and didn't necessarily expect now to be a good time to sell or an easy time to sell. And while it's not necessarily easy as far as all the processes or safety precautions you might need to take from a market perspective, homes are selling fast, they're selling for a good price. So as a surprise to most sellers, it actually is a good time to sell. But what we're seeing is that a lot of them are choosing maybe not to do that right now anyway, because the number of homes available for sale is quite low. And that makes new construction and new home sales a really important relief valve for buyers. And so I talked about existing home sales hitting records. New home sales have also hit the 1 million mark for the first time in 14 years. So both new home sales and existing home sales are rising in response to buyer demand. And new home sales and construction are really important relief valve for buyers who are looking for options to move and just not finding them, or not finding as many of them in the existing homes market.
Yeah, that's really interesting that construction's hit that record high there, as you said. Looking forward at the year ahead, do you see any other emerging trends in the housing market that investors should be keeping an eye on?
So I think we'll want to see what happens with delinquencies in the housing market and forbearance plans. So right now, we have a lot of homeowners that are taking advantage of the forbearance plans. The number is decreasing, but certainly, having that option available right now is preventing a lot of delinquencies from registering and materializing, and the banks having to really sort out what to do with those mortgages. But those provisions were put in place to last about a year. So as we move into the next spring, that's when we're going to be watching to see what happens to those rates. Are people able to, get back to work? Has the jobs market healed enough that they can, get current on their mortgages and continue to pay and work out a plan? Or will we see the possibility of higher foreclosures? And what might that mean for the market? It might mean an influx of inventory available for sale, which could be a good thing, given the fact that the market has really struggled to see that. But that's an open question. It really remains to be seen.
Well, Danielle, thanks so much for your insight today.
Absolutely.
And you can read more coverage about the housing market over at investors.com. For Investors Business Daily, I'm Alexis Garcia.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching Investors Business Daily on YouTube. If you want to watch more videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing.